starts in Freddy's Dream World, Camp Crystal Lake.
Mike? Is that you?
Where Freddy is awakening Jason, and in his sleep, he's always dreaming about what he does best, which is kill scantily clad, usually very beautiful camp counselors.
Okay.
You know, Freddy manipulates Jason in his dreams and possesses the mom, or sort of transforms himself into the mom.
Originally it was going to be the counselor morph, and there was a whole big fog sequence that happened that kind of got pared down. But originally we had how many, like close to 9 or 10 different people that would morph and change into different victims of Jason after he's killed the initial counselor. And that was pared down too. To originally, Ronnie I think it just became too long after a while. It's like, how many times can you see this? At first, when we got into post, that whole sequence went on the floor. And we didn't actually pick that sequence up again until
March.
Yeah, March, which we didn't have enough time to really do it as well as we wanted to, or as high a concept as Ariel originally wanted to do it.
You know, the morphs were supposed to quote Ronnie, be really gross. You know, conceptually, we talked about several things. One was a Jacob's Ladder type of transition. You know, so we had our characters, you know, our counselors constantly lolling their head, and we were going to just speed change them, and then, you know, transition that way with a couple of really gross, bloody beats in between. We wanted the transitions to originate from the wounds. One of the prosthetic effects guys actually had a coroner's list of all of Jason's kills.
Right.
And I think there's like 250 kills or something he's done. And in the coroner's list, it describes who he killed and you know, how Jason killed him. You know, a sharp stick in the eye, you know, a slit throat, you know, a bashed in skull, whatever. So we basically used those lovely thoughts and, you know, had our prosthetics guys essentially put those into play. And, you know, when we shot them, we basically shot everybody, including the main counselor, the lead girl in that sequence, Odessa, I think her name was, all right then and there on that day. Again, originally, you know, in prep, we were like, oh, let's do this on a green screen day. We'll have more time, be more casual, and you know, it was just like, we got them, let's do it now. And we're like, okay, here we go. And you know, the plates lined up pretty well, and we got a fairly gross beat out of it. So, you know, we did it. Hold on. I'm gonna cheat. I'm gonna look at this. This is my tome of crap. That's all my shots. It's all the shots, and I walked around with it every day and tortured people with it, going, "How are we gonna pay for this?" But the blood drops were supposed to be practical blood dripping off of camera, and you know, it was all supposed to be gotten practically, and we're all supposed to, you know, it was supposed to be a little bit of rig removal. The challenge there is that a drop of blood is really small, you know, and not to mention when that blood drops, it drops fast. I mean, it's gone, and it's really tiny. So when we looked at it on the day, we were like, oh my God, we don't see this. We don't see anything. So in classic form, the producers come up to us and say, can we help? And, you know we can.
When we failed to try to do it on the day, then we switched over. It's like, well, let's fall back and we'll try to shoot a green screen element. And we ran into a lot of the same challenges. Is like, how do you get blood that's, you know, only so big to read? And so we, second unit, laid out a whole big green screen on when we were shooting, and we ended up getting the prosthetic guys to make this very gross, viscous fluid that ended up basically looking like ketchup, and, you know, trying to shoot off speed drops and all these other little elements, and eventually all that went in the floor too, because it didn't work at all. So then we had to fall back once more back to CG. And
yeah, you know, it's funny because it's one of those on the day oh, I got a great idea. You know, if we're gonna do the CGI, you know, we can do it off speed and we could have, you know, the blood drop be huge and form out of nowhere and then, you know, drop super slow motion and then you get the crown of blood, you know, and you have a great sound beat and everyone's just like, yeah, let's do that. And then we come home and we're like, I didn't say that. I never said that.
I think even with that, the CG houses struggled with it because it was such a hard thing to get the fluid dynamics to work.
Yeah, I mean, conceptually, you know, from a visual effects standpoint, or just a production standpoint, the rule of thumb is if we can get it on the day, we're gonna get it on the day. If we can't get it on the day, then I'm gonna shoot a live action element, and I'm gonna try real hard to get that live action element. Physically, though, we needed to get blood drops the size of baseballs or grapefruits, and that's big. And so we had big hoses just dropping, you know, essentially like big elephant poops of blood. It was just horrifying. We're like, ah. So we kind of ejected from that. And again, we went to the CG houses. And, you know, today with the software that's out there, you can get some really cool fluid dynamics. And I'm sure we've seen, you know, Propel or Gatorade types of commercials where there's fluid dynamics at work. But this was also a little different because we wanted, you know, the blood to be scary, for it to be creepy. And that was pretty much one of our big challenges throughout the whole film. You know, you know, it had to be scary, you know, it had to be creepy, or it had to be gross. You know, we had to play off of one of those things somehow.
Didn't give Ronnie the sense of depth that he wanted to see back into the little girl's head. He almost wanted to be like they were hollow, like her head was almost like a hollow doll's head. And you know, with the prosthetic, you always had something that was there. You couldn't get it black enough or dark enough.
No, it's like, make it bigger. So, okay, so we just make it gorier. So now we put meat hanging and it just, you know, we had little, I mean, the amount of detail that's in it is really quite amazing because, you know, we painted in, you know, little chunks of inside of the head, which is, you know, meat.
I can find a lot of the discussions quite all graphically gross. It's like, ooh, we get into discussions about, is that meaty enough or is that stuff hanging? Do you want to put more blood, you know?
Here's what we know. At the end of the day, we're going straight to hell for this, and I want to apologize right now, Mom. You know, it's funny because in visual effects, you can do anything for 24 frames, 12 frames, 48 frames, 72 frames. I mean, you can paint 72 frames and make it work. And transitions or in morphs, the slower, the better. You can actually put things in there that the audience will then recognize and go, oh, that's, you know, get a very visceral base of the brain response to. When you're trying to do something that quickly, though, like for a morph, for instance, you have no time to layer that. So it looks almost like a wipe or a smash cut, right? And that was what we were battling there. So in the nine frames, yeah, we throw in everything. We have the wall cracking, we have geometry pushing out, we have dust flying. I mean, it's just everything we can in 9 frames. Just, I mean, it's the most expensive 9 frames in the movie.
There were a lot of different approaches that were done to it. Like at one point, we had the whole concrete wall breaking and falling into pieces.
We had it exploding, you know, over her, and then we're like, well, nothing's hitting her, and you don't see her hair move. That doesn't work, you know. We had it sort of.
And then we get in arguments. We're like, but Ariel, it doesn't matter. It's a dream. It's like, no, that matters.
Exactly. Exactly. That was always the best. Us trying to rationalize any of this is just, oh God, I so need help. Believe it or not, that was an off-speed composite with no motion control, and you know, we actually did the plates by us counting off, seconds trying to figure out, okay, well, if this is an off-speed move, we need the camera to move at this speed now. And it's one of these things that we know now that there isn't anything we can't do with software, and I just knew it was going to work. I don't know. I'm just a fool because it was just, I did the math in my head, and it was like, this is going to work. You guys have got to get to point A to point B in 8 seconds. Give me a well-lit screen, and Bob's your uncle, everything will be cool. So we first shot the girls at 64 frames a second, and it's pushing forward in, what is that? I think it's pushing forward in 8.
I can't believe you remember this.
8 frames or something, and because it's 2.5 times faster than 24 frames a second, we needed to move the camera faster or slow. Oh no, okay, I remember. I'm a nerd. Okay. Yeah. I think the original move was at 21 seconds, and because the camera speed was 2.5 times faster, we needed to move at 2.5 times faster at 8 seconds. I mean, we know that we can match things temporally. We know we can make 2 plates just by speed changing digitally. We know that we can make things match, and we know that we can make things match spatially by resizing. We pulled it off. The comp works great. It's, again, one of those sequences that went through many, many changes. Originally, it was supposed to be a claw that comes out and actually grabs Blake and punctures him through his foot. And, we looked at doing it practically. We looked at, how we were going to puncture the foot, and we came to the realization, well, wait a minute, if you could puncture the kid's foot, you could puncture the kid's head. So that's not going to work. So now it's like, all right, why don't we just have the shadow claw go up and scare Blake and try to kill Blake? And we shot the plates with a claw in mind. And, we shot shadow references, clean plates, all the basic stuff. We had rigs for Blake, the character, actually could look at so we could get the eye lines. And Ronnie didn't want any movement on the chest. We were actually going to hit him with air or something so we'd get some movements. No. Nothing that Freddy does can affect Blake. But then when we took it into post and we actually started working with the claw, it was almost completely and totally unimpressive as just a as a claw. At which point we started to go fishing. We searched around. Actually, we were at one house and.
Yeah, we were at one house. We pulled it out. We had our own in-house guy take a stab at it, and eventually we kind of went to an art director named Lubo Christoph, and he kind of redesigned the whole look of it with Ronnie.
And again, one of the things that we did is, aside from modeling Freddy and pulling him across the street and then creating a CG shadows, if you look at him, he's got volume in there. There's stuff moving around. Otherwise, it's a shadow. How do you make a shadow play up against? A shadow can play up against a wall, no problem, as long as the shadow is darker than the object that it's up against. We actually put some fractal stuff in there, and in order to get it to play and actually get it to read, we cheated in highlights so you could see, Freddy's face, for instance. And they did an amazing job putting all that together for us. And the other thing that we did is, as the shadow was coming across the ground, we actually broke the rule that we had originally, which is Freddy can't really affect anything, but we needed to motivate Blake moving. So as Freddy's shadow comes at him, leaves kind of part. Now you can argue, well, those leaves are getting blown by a rogue wind or something, or a breeze or something. But it, exactly. You just said it's a dream.
Sorry.
Okay.
For nose jobs, what kind of...
anytime you have a big star, you ever was a little bit trepidatious, and she was as well, and how this all was going to work out. We are right up, I think we're right after lunch, we get to cut her nose off, and it's a big visual effect in that, it required a lot of elements, and it required us actually working very closely with Kelly.
First day of shooting, we're there. We've got the guy with Freddy's glove, and we've got a stand-in to do it because we didn't have Robert Englund on the shoot at that point. So we've got a stunt double in with the glove, and he's very trepidatious about putting these scissor claws up Kelly's nose. And finally, it just comes down to Ariel's like, "I'll do it. Just get out of the way, and we just got to put him up in there." And
yeah, that's right. Actually, yeah, Kelly was okay with it. I mean, I put the things in her nose. I'm like, Kelly, I got to tell you, this isn't going to look good, and it's not going to feel good. But in order for us to get this, I got to do this. And I'm like, Ronnie, is this okay? And she's like, yeah, you go do this. So I, put these scissor claws and these knife claws in Kelly's nose, and I start pulling them out. And I'm like, is this uncomfortable? How far can I pull it? And Catherine Isabel, one of the other female stars, is sitting on the couch next to us and going, "Oh, very nice, Ariel. That's our first day of shooting, and you do that." And I'm like, you know what? I'm killing you next, so you just pipe down, Missy. At any rate, we shot all the elements. We shot her plate of the various plates of her reacting and jerking back. We put the claws in her nose, and we pulled them out, quickly to get the nose to flare and for her to react. And then on another day, we shot a green screen nose. Basically, it was something that our prosthetic guys built for us.
Bill Terazakis built that, cast her face and built her whole nose and designed all the blood stuff in it. And there was a lot of discussion about, well, how should her nose come off? What would they do? Are you slicing it this way, or is it coming off this way?
We definitely wanted a chunk to fly by camera,
right?
And we definitely wanted blood to squirt out, and so we plumbed this green screen nose, and we lined it up on a switcher and shot it, and then put all the pieces together. And
the guys at Sunnyside put that together, didn't they?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Then we remember we needed to shift the blood. We had Tom.
Right, and then we had another guy come in. They wanted to switch shift the timing of the blood to be faster, so we actually even had to find another guy because at that point Sunnyside had lost their artist who'd actually comp the shot. But I think their biggest challenge in that was the tracking of the prosthetic piece.
The concept originally was that Gib would see the boyfriend, just a hint of the boyfriend, and inside the silo, it's not a silo at all. It turns out to be Freddy's dream world boiler room. And again, conceptually, Gib is supposed to see in the distance Trey standing there and having a conversation, but something looks slightly off. At which point, Gib's like, Trey, are you okay? And then Trey starts to approach Gib at an incredible pace, but as he's approaching her, he's supposed to be breaking to pieces because he's already starting to decompose. In prep, which is like the perfect movie, you make a movie 3 times. You make it in prep, right, which is the perfect movie. Nothing has gone wrong, nothing can go wrong. It looks amazing. It's in our heads, but it looks amazing. We make it again in production, where we get out there and things aren't working out right. It starts to piss rain on us and it's not supposed to, or someone doesn't feel good, and then we make it again in post. Well, we got Trey all the way through the production side of it. We shot the elements for him. We actually scanned them. Originally in prep, though, we talked about how can we make Trey, break apart and look real, and nothing is better than doing it real. So we talked about literally puppeting the actor, putting him up on a big, crane, and doing sort of a being John Malkovich on him, not allowing him to actually control himself, but we control him. We talked about the potential of actually doing a Bunraku deal, where we had people from behind in green screen suits move him unrealistically, and sort of
or a puppet.
Yeah, in a creepy way. The problem is that you think of all these rigs and you try to do all these rigs. The reality of it is that unless we really have an idea of how he's gonna move and where he's gonna move from where to what, you can't really prep it. You can't really do it. And we didn't really have that part of the boiler room set up. We didn't really have everything we need. We didn't have all the knowledge that was required for us to to create the rigs to do it practically. At which point we do what we always do, which is fall back on CGI. When we started to bring it into post, though, the movement, it was so, again, so quick. He had to move so fast. I mean, the idea behind Trey was that he was like just a vicious animal, you know? All he cared about, like a rabid dog, all he cared about was getting to his quarry. And he didn't care about how badly he was breaking. All he was going to do was break, you know, fix. If he broke, he was to fix himself enough so he could take his next step. That was it. But again, every time we ended up trying to put that into play, it never really looked quite right.
One of the other things that I think we fought a lot on was that diminished it, was that the room itself is supposed to telescope backwards. So when Trey comes out, if it's telescoping backwards, he recedes, you know, which is, you know, and you want to get him into your face. So we kind of fought that for a while too. And I was like, can we just come out and not recede the room? And no, we want to have it. We want to see that back. And in the first initial test, when we did that with Tim Clark, it was, your eye goes to watching the room telescope and not so much to Trey, and you're fighting that.
Eventually, we ended up using a combination of both the real live action stuff and some CGI in it, and it never quite got to the point where anyone would believe it. The real key, again, is to make it visceral. You know, you had to feel the breaks. If any of you guys watch football, you know, there's that very famous sequence where Lawrence Taylor breaks Joe Theismann's ankle. And anyone that's ever seen that and has twisted an ankle just cringes. It's that same response that we wanted. You know, we wanted the breaks to just be vicious, and we want them to feel real. And you know, there's enough footage of people breaking themselves to know what that feels like and looks like. And that's what we were trying to go for. And again, is we ran out of time, and really we ran out of facility resources.
Yeah, Caterpillar, the Freddy pillar.
Just talk to him about how we almost lost that sequence.
Yeah, at one point it was, you know, CG Caterpillar sequence, and you know, at one point the producer came up to us and said, "Listen, you know, we're going over budget. We need to trim some stuff. So, I mean, do we really need this scene, you know, in the movie? Because you know, is there anything we could do? Because we bid it, you know, fairly high, and." Cinecide actually was interested in doing character work, and so I knew a lot of the guys there, and they said, "Yeah, bring it over. We'll cut you a really good deal on it," and that's how they ended up getting the sequence and doing the character work. And you know, I think originally what they wanted to do is close the Cinecide's reel with the Freddy pillar. Unfortunately, the company didn't survive, but.
I'll tell you that, I mean, for me, the Freddy pillar is a real, one of those really great moments. I mean, it's an homage to Alice in Wonderland, sort of a bent-up Freddy homage to Alice in Wonderland, and I would have hated to see it not make it in the film. So I remember fighting for it tooth and nail, saying this is something that should really be in the show. The Freddy pillar went, again, like all things, through a bunch of incarnations. Originally, it was supposed, as it's written, it starts off as a little caterpillar that, as it approaches the very stoned Freeburg, it grows up in size. It gets bigger and bigger to the point where then it pulls out the hookah. But you know, one of the things that we required to have on set was at least a maquette, at minimum, of what this caterpillar was going to be. And what we really wanted was something that was locked and bought. This is the model, this is what we're doing. If you look at the maquette, you'll see how radically he'd changed. But we started off with something. We started off with the stand-in. You know, we were able to show Freeburg the eye lines and everything, and this is what he's going to do, and you know, get used to him. And then when he's actually interacting with the caterpillar, we had WCT create this green screen balloon in the shape of a caterpillar, or just the area of him, so we could actually hold on to something and fight with it, you know. And you know, we ended up removing that green screen balloon and putting in our Freddy pillar. The Freddy pillar itself also went through a lot of incarnations in terms of look and size, and
whether he was wet or dry or how slimy he really could be. You know, how much Freddy could look like, how much scabs and burns did he have, what could he do with his claws, what could he hold, you know.
Yeah, we really even wanted to put some of Robert Englund's physical signature into it, some of his swagger and the looks that he'd try to do. So we looked at, you know, tape and said, look, this is Robert, this is Freddy. You know, even though he's in the shape of the caterpillar, you've got to be able to translate that caricature and movement to the caterpillar, you know. And, you know, it was fairly successful.
Pinball Jason was originally designed all we were going to do is do the in-between beats. We would actually shoot Jason, the stunt Jason, hitting the walls, and which is how we did do it. And then we would use CG Jason, and we transition between the beats, shoot it with the lock off, knowing that we can then do some camera moves on it in post.
Conceptually, again, this is where, you know, all the best laid plans just go to waste. We wanted a stuntman to physically hit the pipes, because that contact, again, if you do it right and you do it hard enough, is visceral. You see the pipes shake, even for a brief moment, and you see the stuntman just go through the movements.
Well, we got in over at Pixel and did some animation tests to show Ronnie the difference between, okay, here's what it looks like, you know, we'll transition it. But Ronnie wanted him to go up to the top corner, and we didn't have an actual beat where he actually hit that area, so we kept it all CG. And Ronnie saw it, he's like, oh, that, I like that. That's what I want. And it became like, you want that? So now we have to make all of the beats CG, and he became a full CG character at that point. We replaced all the wire removals and all the banging, except for the background plate. But what we would fight against is that Jason is so big and heavy that if you start throwing him around really fast, it starts to lose the impact. It gives it away.
By the end of the sequence, when he's going between, you know, the two bumpers, really fast, bing, 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 you're like, oh my God, can't we do this slower, you know? Because there's a big man we're moving. It's like, nope.
It doesn't, story-wise, achieve what the director wants. So.
Yeah, and every single hit. I mean, Jason is a brute. So between the hits, you know, he's just getting madder and madder. So, you know, conceptually, it's, you know, Jason hits the pipe, you know, and he fully breaks. Bam! He's, you know, out of control of his body. And then all of a sudden, you know, as soon as he starts to transition to the next moment, he takes that moment to really just try to tense, and he, you know, turns away and tries to fight it for a minute. And then all of a sudden, you know, he hits the pipe, bam! You know? And he's just getting, this is how I hurt myself, by the way. That's what we wanted. And we didn't really get it physically on the day, so we ended up using a lot of CG.
Oh, tilt. And dig a little deeper.
It's supposed to be 2 beats. It's supposed to be the knife going into a prosthetic head, a big, bright waft of energy, and then come down into Jason's dream world, which is Crystal Lake. Again, a very Gustave Doré version of Camp Crystal Lake. We get back into post, again, making the movie for the 3rd time, and it's decided that we need that beat back in. But we haven't shot any elements. We didn't shoot blood, we didn't shoot a brain, we didn't shoot meat, so it's like, are we gonna do this? So we do what we always do, which is, you know, we're just gonna do it all CG. Again, you're fighting, how long was that shot? I even forget.
In the end, it was like about 5 seconds.
Which is really quick, but you're building a lot of geometry, and again, you need to establish a lot of elements and have them sell in like no time. So you know, what Ronnie wanted was, as soon as the blade passes into the brain, you have one bead of black, right? So now we're in this sort of murky red world, and all of a sudden we come across the hemisphere of the brain, and you're supposed to recognize at that moment, this is Jason's brain. And then you're supposed to go into the cleaving meat as it's separating and sinews are popping. And then at that moment, you see electrical charges, like there's some energy that's taking place. What you realize you're doing is you're going from a macro world, or actually the real world, to macro, to micro, to like subatomic. Because the next level that we go into after the meat cleaves is the synapses. Once we come out of the synapses into the Schieffer matte painting, we shot, our production designer, John Willett, did an amazing job building a dilapidated version of Jason's house. We put dead bodies and heads all over the place, and we floated some in the water. So we go from the matte painting into Jason's house. And, you know, what does Jason dream? What does he see? And that's what we were trying to show. So he opens up the closet, and in the closet, he sees all his dead bodies that he's killed. Originally, we were supposed to just shoot one plate, one element of a whole bunch of bodies underwater. And it's sort of like what happens in Spinal Tap when they drop Stonehenge and it's like an 18-inch model. We get there on the day and there's 3 bodies, and we're like, what are we supposed to do with this? Well, we thought you could cut and paste. How? You know, we're not going to do this as, you know, we can't roto them, so we got to do underwater green screen. Of course, we weren't really prepared to do underwater green screen, but our second unit DP, Rob McLaughlin, who is heroic, got in the water, figured it out, lit the green screens, and we essentially did a cut and paste and clone with a bunch of bodies, and I think it works. Originally, we wanted to go into the closet, literally turn around from underwater, you know, in the closet, go back to Jason, and now see Jason underwater, but not Jason as Jason, but Jason as a little kid sitting there screaming, because that's how he dies.
Struggling on the water.
Yeah, and that's his nightmare.
When we were shooting the actual plate with Jason opening the closet door, we thought, well, it'd just be a nice lock off, you know, and Jason opens the door, but it became this huge telescoping crane shot that moves in there.
And what's hilarious about it is when we hear this, you know, Kevin calls me, he's like, Ariel, oh my God, you gotta come here and see the move. And I'm like, what? He's like, just get over to the stage and you gotta look at the move. And I come over to the move, I'm like, oh my God, how are we gonna do with this? I'm like, okay, think. We gotta put tracking markers on that screen. We got a couple edges here we could work with. You gotta take copious notes, guys, and, you know, tell me what the move is. And we were able to reproduce the camera, but a lot of it was just, you know, pixel pounding.
Yeah,
just taking the pixels and
just
pounding them into the dirt until it works. And I'm like, come on, it's a simple gag, you know, we shoot a plate, and Kim's like, no. Get the motion control rigs out there, you know, we'll get a person mover. It ended up being, how many elements were in that?
God, like 4 or 5 different passes.
Yeah.
The trick was, because we did put him on Robert on our people mover, and Ariel called this out right away. It's like, his head's just gonna do this, you know, it's gonna look like it's on a machine.
Which it did.
And it did.
We didn't have any of the wagga that would occur if someone was holding a head, and a head is a heavy thing. Maybe not mine, but most heads are. And so then we also shot another plate, again with motion control rig, but without Robert, with Jason just holding a prosthetic head. And that's got all that natural swing and movement. So we just married the two plates. You know, we married the head with Robert Englund, and then because we didn't have a background, it was all shot on green screen, we put in the fog, and the house that did that shot, Digital Dimension, even went as far as to putting a little taste of the water in. And again, it's one of those things that no one's gonna notice, but I do. I see that water a mile away, I'm like, yes, you know?